Yo, what up? Welcome to, basically, okay, this needs some introduction. Get this shit out of the way first. I don't know why that was here, besides just, like, to look at. But, I have a problem. I reinstall Windows for fun. So, generally speaking, I like to have a small Windows domain set up for networking purposes. But, just this past week, I've reinstalled the fucking domain controller like 8 times and gone through the motions of configuring it to allow something like this thing or that thing to connect to the domain and download files and stuff over DOS and Windows 98. But the thing is, doing that isn't really covered that well on like YouTube or the internet, because if you look up like how to connect Windows 98 to Windows Server 2003 domain, you get a whole bunch of people that are just like, why are you trying to do this? You should upgrade the fucking clients instead of trying to get these old operating systems on your domain. But like, yeah, I have old computers that run these old operating systems best. That's why I want them on a network, and because burning CDs is annoying. So last night I decided, hey, let's try replacing my domain controller again with Samba. And let's just say Samba has been removing the older protocols and stuff. So like as of like 4.17, you can't connect to a Samba domain controller using landman authentication anymore. So my plans of using a Samba domain controller are dead in the water forever, unless I want to deal with compiling an older version. But honestly, that's too much work. I don't want to deal with compiling Samba. So, as a video idea, since I was gonna fucking do it anyway, why don't I just go through and record the process of setting up a domain controller and then allowing Windows 98 and the such to connect. It's probably gonna be kind of boring unless you like networking crap. I think it's interesting, but that's just because I find enterprise-grade software interesting. So I guess we'll get started. The process of the video is going to be roughly go over installing or setting up a domain controller, how to allow Windows 98 to connect. Then we need to get a Windows 98 client, probably this thing, since this thing has a pretty good network card in it, connected to it. So, let's get started, I guess. Okay, so how are we deploying this? We're using Proxbox, since this is my server, and the first thing we gotta do is pretty much we're gonna walk through making a VM, and it's going to be Windows Server 2003, which is this, Microsoft Windows XP 2003, then add the VirtIO driver disk, which is this, graphics card spice, turn on the guest agent, set this to VirtIO SCSI single, but we won't be using that. Set this to IDE. Windows XP doesn't need much, so we'll set it to like 10 gigabytes. We'll give it 2 CPUs of my host. As for memory, XP doesn't need that much, so we'll give it like a gigabyte. Then set it to be this with VLAN tag of 69, because that's my VLAN for old shit. Then we wait for the VM to be created, which is right here. Then let me quickly apply tags to it, so domain, vintage, Windows. Okay, so then the next step is to just install Windows. And if you've never installed, I'm not going to go into detail about installing Windows Server 2003 because it's not that interesting. So I'm going to start the procedure and just blaze through it more or less. So yeah, we'll be back momentarily once I have something interesting to show about that. Okay, so I have Windows Server 2003 installed now. This isn't a full tutorial on how to set up a domain controller, since I assume you already know roughly what to do, just things to note quickly. Make sure you have a static IP address, make sure you have DNS set up since this will become your DNS server. then it's pretty much just run DC promo, walk through the steps, and yeah, once it's done, we will have a domain controller. So we'll be back once I'm done putting in the information this thing wants. Okay, so now we've joined this computer to a domain, and I've also installed the its group policy management, because I like using this better than the built-in security policy tool crap. So what you want, this is where shit gets real. So to get Windows 98 to connect to this, you pretty much have to dump all the security options you can think of. So we're gonna start with the default domain controllers policy, click edit, then go to Windows settings, security settings, local policies, and we're gonna go to security options. This is where we have to start dumping all the security options. LDAP signing requirements, none. Digitally, anything that involves digitally encrypt or sign secure channel data, always disable it. If it says when possible, you can leave it on. In my testing, this does not affect it, or Windows 98's ability to connect, but you need to turn always off. In terms of what else you need to do, digitally sign communications, always disabled. Digitally sign if server agrees, that's fine. Digitally sign communications, no, disable. If client agrees, scroll, there's another thing we need to do, which is, it is right here. LAN man authentication level, tick this, send LM and NTLM, use NTLM v2 security if negotiated. And then one last thing, there's this, do not store LAN manager hash and X password change, disable that. This will allow us to, when we set a password for an account, have a hash that Windows 98 can understand when we, Windows 98 speaks when it tries to connect to this. That's all we need in terms of the domain controller. Now, it's pretty much you go replicate these settings on the default domain policy. So if we come here and click edit, Windows settings, security settings, it's pretty much the same thing again. So I'm gonna go do that, and give me a sec. Okay, now that that's done, we're also gonna go to account policies, password policy, and we're just gonna dump these two. You don't exactly need to do this, it just makes it easier, and also just because this is a domain that only I will be able to access, I don't think I need super strong security. So now we have all of the settings dumped, and we will quickly force a group policy update with gp update/force. Then the next thing we need to do is we need to make a user that will have a LAN man hash. So we're going to go to Active Directory, users and computers, drill down to users, and we're going to make a netboot user. So user, netboot, then netboot, and put in a password that is very secure, I swear. Yep, and then that should be everything you need to allow Windows 98 to connect to the network. So we're gonna go get a Windows 98 machine set up, and I'll show you that. So we'll be right back. Alright, we got some shape or form of Windows 98 here. At least I think so. Let's see. We are using the Pentium 2 retro sleeper thing that has a SIS GPU in it for context to test domain connectivity. Oh shit. Wait a minute. Oh. Yeah, okay. This install is actually broken, so I can go reinstall Windows 98. So, alright, we're back. I have made the most slop Windows 98 install imaginable. This doesn't matter. I did do y'all a favor and install the video drivers and the network drivers. So, how do we connect to it, or to our domain? Well, the first thing we have to do is we have to go into the network settings. Why is dial-up adapter here? I hate you, dial-up, go away. We're gonna switch to client for Microsoft Networks. Properties, what you should probably do is tick this box and put in our domain name. You can sometimes get away with logging in on just the work group if the work group is set to the NetBIOS name, but it's better to do it this way. So we're gonna just set it to that. Client for Microsoft Networks. It probably has to install the Microsoft Network client. Now, also, if you just installed a domain controller without DHCP, you'll have to set static IP addresses, but I already have a DHCP server set up on Alpine for stuff that you'll probably see someday. But not today. Today is just setting up a domain controller and then showing that Windows 98 can log into it as soon as it boots back up, because this computer is kind of slow, and you have to press F1 on every boot because this power supply is missing one of the voltages that it expects, because this board is from the 90s and that power supply is modern enough to have PCI Express power connectors. So yeah. Okay, here's the login prompt. So we're gonna log in with the user we made earlier, which is netboot, password, netboot, domain, Astral. Click OK. The domain password is supplied. What? I did it right, though. Am I stupid? I might be stupid. Hang on. Netboot, password, netboot, netboot. I might be stupid. I'm gonna go look into this. We'll be right back. Okay, apparently I'm just a fucking fool and forgot what I set the password to. So I changed the password for the netboot account. So if we just type in that password now, Windows will let me in. And as you can see, we're logged on to netboot. And if we go to network neighborhood, here's our domain controller. I think we should be able to, yep, we can access the net logon share, even though there's nothing in here. And sysful, our domain, they have some domain policies set, but Windows 98 ignores group policy. Yeah, that's pretty much it. This should also be able to accept DOS clients. I don't have anything to test that right offhand, but that's pretty much all you have to do to configure a domain controller and then allow Windows 98 to connect to it. One thing I will note, you need at least Server 2003. I've tried it on 2012 and 2008 R2, and no matter what I did to lower the security, I got an error on login that was just like, this request is not supported by the network. So I don't know what Server 2003 and I guess Server 2000, I'm sure that would work with Windows 98, do differently than Windows Server 2008 R2 or 2012 R2. So if you want something that is known to work just fine, use Server 2003 or Server 2000 for your domain controller, and then just lower all the security, and that's fine. That's about it. I was gonna do this, just gonna reinstall my domain controller anyway, so I figured I'd make a video about it. If you want to see other like network domain related stuff, I can maybe do some of that. I know what might be interesting is installing Windows 98 over the network using Windows deployment services and PXE Linux. That might be interesting, but I don't know if I can make that an interesting video, but that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching. Catch you whenever I make another video. See you later.